often will I open its mouth and swallow me.
My name is Nathan Green.
My name is Pete Duggins.
Josh Rios.
Sterling Allen.
Jim Brown.
Michael Sieben.
Ryan Hennessy. Carlos Rosales Silva.
We sort of are all over the place. From the very beginning, we have a lot of different personal practices, and that's usually rolled into generally like our bigger practice. So we try to incorporate, for the most part, everything that anyone's really interested in wants to share with the group.
I think the sculpture usually always makes its way. You know, we've never had a show of just flat work necessarily, so sculpture and then also video, I think, has been widely used because of its sort of collaborative nature. It lends itself to people filling in different roles.
Of course, drawing. But drawing seems to be kind of the keystone of every project we've ever done.
And I think we also have an ongoing conversation just about different ways to exhibit the work. So even with the addition of photography here and this show, just trying to figure out different ways to say what the group was talking about.
I thought, some sure, I mean, that's obviously ends up as photography, but it has a sculptural component to begin. And there's even like a text, a writing
Component.
maybe even language or writing is also one of our mediums, of course.
Generally, there's like an aesthetic that's shared between them, and we started as a commercial gallery, and we were interested in showing work, but none of us necessarily ever agreed upon the same kind of vision of what we were interested in art personally. So when we came together and started making work, one of the things that we did have was humor, and that was kind of a way that we could, I guess, talk about things.
And I think humor is a way to keep us involved in the projects, like that many times can be really laborious, or like, it's difficult, like all getting on the same page about an idea, and then oftentimes there's many hours, required to do these things, and because it's not your own personal, sort of thing, humor is a way to kind of like keep it light and hopefully enjoy yourself for at least some of it. And I think we all have like individual artists and stuff because we have our variety of like interest in art is so wide. That everybody kind of has their own thing that they're interested in, but we've looked a lot even outside of art or fine art into like music and things like that, how other people work together in sort of a pick yourself up by the bootstraps kind of way, and that's I think something that we can all sort of find excitement in.
No, I always think of like OK Mountain is really just the product of these separate voices come together, and that becomes what it is, but it's it very much doesn't start off with that, like what it, something that we're.
I don't think we're going to name any names.
That's what happens.
But Mad Magazine and stuff like that.
I'm going to name names, right?
It's drawing and it's parody and it's like, things like that. But there's a lot of like video that's not art that I think everyone's into, and sketch comedy and stuff like that too.
Cultural things, like us looking to cultural things for inspiration and influence as opposed to specific artists, just because all of our personal interests in specific artists are so varied and diverse.
Like they're kind of at odds actually. What someone might really be excited by in terms of art, somebody else might not really see value in. And so we sort of leave those things at the door and only bring in what's useful. And this is a piece called Roadside Attractions.
This piece is inspired obviously by brochure hutches that you would find in hotels around tourist locations. All of us were inspired by the design of the cards and some of the ridiculous subject matter celebrating Americana.
And so this is kind of one of those first projects where everyone had kind of an assignment of making 10 designs front and back that were then printed all in one location and afforded everybody the opportunity to collaborate even though we were like across the country.
I think this is also a good example of a shared sense of humor among the group.
There's things in here that the product or the idea or the joke or the character or something stems from a previous project. It tends to like reference back to not only things that exist, outside of ourselves, but things that we've kind of like built up.
They become a sort of a part of a group vocabulary.
Yeah, and it can be revisited and stuff. So.
We're standing in front of prototype, number 1 through 10. This work sort of co-ops the visual language of commercial photography. Each of us sort of colliding two pre-existing things together, sort of ungraciously, and then sort of putting like this sleek facade of the visual language of commercial photography on top of it to kind of make it a believable image.
Like we'd been looking at sports equipment, tools, like a trade show kind of aesthetics have been sort of lingering. So this is kind of maybe one stab at putting a few of those things together and boiling it down to just a series of photographs rather than like a big installation or performance piece. This is a way to invest, somewhat into an object, but then ultimately, the product is a photograph, so that there's like a distance between the object and what you see that we're sort of keeping from a viewer by not letting you walk around this object or inspect it too closely. You're given just like a very limited, sort of controlled perspective of whatever these things are.
You would initially look at those and think that these could potentially be something you see in Sky Mall or something, but then upon closer inspection you realize that they're actually absurd. And so there's this moment when you realize that something that visually is so recognizable is actually really, this invented absurdity. So this work behind us is called School Night. It's the largest work in the show. It is carved styrofoam. It was interested in sort of isolating a scene that's sort of familiar with, pretty, I guess it's Americana. And it was about finding this transitional place where it's in between childhood and it's in between adulthood.
Yeah, we talked about, there's a lot of places I think that being not old enough to do like adult things like go to bars and stuff like that, and being too young for playgrounds. And so what you end up doing is like hopping fences and drinking beers in playgrounds and places like that. And so that's kind of the narrative here.
Basically, yeah, it's like how-to bookshelf. All the names, the titles of the book have to address this idea of how to do something in some way, shape, or form. Each of us was responsible for kind of designing and printing about 20 inches worth of books, and we were like very interested in like ideas of doing it yourself, and also like ideas of like what kind of knowledge books contain. Also kind of interested in this idea of like the way a sort of bookshelf is a kind of a snapshot of a particular person, or how you can kind of read some meaning about a person through their book collection.
It's a lot like our other projects in that, we're kind of calling attention to the very things that you'll like go to the thrift store and you'll look right past, because for the most part, how-to books they're not cool to own. You admit your shortcomings by owning them.
Sure.
And they often deal with technologies or things that are outdated.
Yeah.
So.
And there's a lot of inside jokes and stuff like that in here, but there's also just stuff that's just completely open to anybody can understand it and get it.
I'm David, and my predominant medium is painting on stuff. The whimsy portion of that is that I think that's just an innate sensibility that I have, and naturally that would come out in the work. In terms of the shapes, they're all traced gestures or traced elements of other paintings. So, for instance, back here I have, Pascali's 4 hunting trophies, I think is how you translate the Italian title. But there's a sculpture laid out just like this. They actually came off of the wall. It was canvas wrapped around wood, and I found it in I think it was a Sotheby's auction catalog. Found it online, traced it, which is what you see in this makeshift pencil line, I guess. And from there I would extend the width of the the stroke in varying degrees. Keep a record of that, pick the ones that I like, and then overlap them and layer them, and to the point where you get, like I said, these approximations that just jut out and become the defining perimeter of the work. This one, it's mostly a white piece on a white wall. From the specific photo I used, it had elements of blue floating in there, a little bit of yellow, you know, that might or might not be hard to trace. So that, I stayed pretty true to my initial viewing of that image. I would start out with a quick gesture, a quick trace of a gesture or of an element from someone else's work, and then allow that to dictate what becomes of the shape. And I think each one of these was in different ways. Like I didn't stick to one true format of those rules. They had you know, room to breathe, I guess, and so you get this range. I started making these designs. Didn't know what to really make of them, and Tim popped by the studio while I was working on them, and I, you know, asked his advice. What do you think? And he mentioned David Reed, and I hadn't put that together, but you know, I love David Reed, so we both geeked out on David Reed for a few weeks. You know, I was going through all of his books and so forth, and I felt a kinship there and something that I want to pursue. So I would say for this body, there's a heavy dose of David Reed, as well as the artist that I've referenced. There's a Tuttle over there that's always kind of been in the work, but I would say it's more artists or artworks in particular that influence or inspire me. You're always inspired by your surroundings, or influence might be a better way to put it. And specifically Las Vegas, it tends to bring a certain type of personality that's pretty self-sufficient. It brings a certain individual that I think has become my peers, and so that's definitely influenced who I am, and then by extension where the work has grown.